This is an old style Topcon base that has the single screw on the carrier cover. The oldest styles had 3 screws, but then they went to a single screw, and then the D series has gone back to multiple screws. So sometimes the carrier cover can get broken at this point, and you will need to put another one on, or you may need to change the spring. So a similar case of changing this carrier cover and getting to the spring to replace the spring, there's similar steps in that. And we want to be careful because if you don't do it correctly, you could lose your bearings, all your bearings, 60 bearings in here. So you want to be careful about some steps. Now, to get this cover off and to get to the spring, you're eventually going to be taking off these 2 screws. But we want to be careful when we take this screw off. We want to get this screw off before we take this screw, because, well, I'll show you on the bottom. If we take this screw off and drop the spindle gear, then you have a chance of losing your bearing holder, dropping down too far and losing your bearings. Okay, the important sequence to remember is to leave the gear on your spindle. Leave that on, because that's going to be the stop for your bearing holder and your shaft underneath. It's not going to come out, but it won't go out this way, but it can fall this way. So remember to leave this gear on your spindle while you're doing this operation, because if that's out, then your shaft will fall and you'll lose your bearings. So this screw is pretty tight. That's not the fun part. It's a really tight screw, and you can just try to unscrew it while it's in place, but there's a chance that it's going to be turning the whole shaft and not staying still to unscrew it. So we're going to have to hold this bottom, they call this a plate, hold it with some vice grips underneath so that we can unscrew the screw. Well, go ahead and try it. See if you can get it loose. And you might need something to help you turn it and stabilize it. You might even have to put it on the ground, put your feet on the axle to hold it still, and put pressure on it and try to turn that screw. And it might turn, and you might think, oh, it's doing well, but actually the whole thing is turning underneath. So we're going to have to turn it over and hold that plate that's also screwed onto the bottom of the shaft, and so it will hold it. Now you might have a weight in here if it's a 3E or a 6E, so you might have to take this weight out. It's got 2 Phillips screws. You can take those out. They screw right into the housing. And then you can get to this plate that's connected to your shaft. So what we'll do is we'll get some channel locks and lock it in. It's okay if you booger this up, because it's just going to go in, and there's space for it. If it's boogered up a little bit, it's okay. But just lock your vice grips on here. And then you can turn it over and then unscrew it with your crescent wrench and your screwdriver, and then you'll be able to unscrew it, and your vice grips is holding it from turning. So it might be a little hard, but you can just go ahead and take that off. Now we've got that main screw off. Now we have to take that off. We'll release our vice grips. We don't have to worry about it falling down because our gear is still in there. And now we'll remove this screw, the spindle screw, either with a spanner wrench, or these are some needle nose that have been filed down to a point. So it's just like a spanner wrench. Now underneath the screw there's some washers, some very thin washers. Those are very important, so don't lose them. Sometimes there's one, sometimes two, sometimes three. And when you're putting it back together, you need to put those back on. It serves an important function. Okay, now we've got both our screws off. We're ready to come on up. Okay, now we've gotten our spindle. There's no groove on the shaft here like the Marco or other slit lamps have a little key that it must fit inside, but the Topcon doesn't. It's just a flat surface. And so here's your bearings. They're still in because we still have our bottom gear on. Now if you're changing the spring, you can change the spring and then reattach your carrier. But if you're just replacing the carrier, then you can put it back on. If you are replacing the spring, make sure you grease the spring up with some grease. That keeps it quiet and allows it to move up and down. And then we can put our carrier back on. It's going to fit down in the groove. If the joystick were on here, I could turn it so that the spindle shaft would fit back into here, but this one doesn't have it, so I'm going to turn the gear with my finger and line it up. And when you're putting your washers back on, put them down first and make sure you're not hitting that shaft. Otherwise you'll be pushing them on the shaft. Once you've got the washers lined up and your screw is in, you can keep it a little bit loose so that it can move, and put your bolt in. There's not necessarily which one goes first, so it's up to you. And make sure it's the same screw and it's going in the correct threads. The threads are very fine, so you want to be careful about not cross-threading it. And if you had to hold it to loosen it, you're probably going to have to hold the bottom to tighten it. but we'll try it. We'll see how tight we can get it. This feels pretty tight, but you want to stabilize it and then lock it on. If the bottom is turning, go ahead and hook your vice grips back up to that plate down there to hold it still so you can tighten it up. Now that you have it tight, this is a good time to go ahead and deal with your spindle threads. Just go ahead and re-loosen up here, and well, actually loosen this screw first, and then take this nut off, and then take 3 screws out of the gear, and then there's 3 screws underneath it, and you can pull this spindle shaft out and clean the threads on the spindle shaft and the threads inside here, the gear holder underneath the gear, and clean all those and put a light coat of very light viscosity grease, and not a thick viscosity, but a very thin, and make sure it screws in and out easily, and then you can put it all back together, and that's going to help the tension on the joystick. So I would do that. If you're this deep, you might as well do that too. And once you have it all put back together, don't forget your weight. If you had a weight on there, go ahead and put your weight back on, screw that back on. If you wanted to see what's going on in here with this bearing holder, it's not going to come out. So your shaft is never going to pull up because this bearing holder is resisting this plate. Now if you take this plate off, yeah, you could lose everything. You could pull it straight out of there and you would lose all your bearings. But the way this is made is they have a screw on the side, and that screw goes in there, and there's a groove on this holder that it travels on, and that screw that goes in through this way limits the bearing holder from going past it, so it's never going to come up. So, in case you're wondering how that happens. Now, if you lose your bearings, you're going to have fun putting them back in. I haven't had to do it yet on this, but there may come a time when I have to do it. So, in conclusion, the difference between this one without bearings and this one that still has the bearings is that the spindle gear is still attached, and that's keeping the shaft from coming out. So this is the key. If you're going to be changing your spring or changing the carrier cover, keep that in, and that's your protection. So I'm going to show you this, just the diagram of the carrier and the shaft. That's the spindle shaft, and there's your bearing holder, and you can see this little groove right here, and this screw in your housing that keeps that bearing holder from coming out of there and from dropping down. It's going to stay in this holder while this is still screwed into the base, and that's on there really tight. So don't take this plate off, or you'll pull it up and you'll lose it. So leave your plate on. That's what you're going to use your vice grips on to tighten it while you're loosening up the screw. And the all-important gear on the spindle. Keep that thing on until you're safe, until your screw is back in and your assembly is complete. Now the newer style Topcons, they have 3 screws, and you can just take the 3 screws off, and after you take the spindle screw off, you can release it, and it's not as dangerous as this one. So you shouldn't have any trouble with the D7. And there's a video that shows you how to that talks about the base, the base of the D series Topcon. I forgot to show you the part numbers. Now the spring says it's for an SL2. You have a different slit lamp. But these aren't changed as often as the Hawkstrite and the Marco. At least I haven't changed them. Oh yeah, there's one other thing I forgot to mention. If that screw is really tight and you can't hold it even with vice grips, then, or if you don't have vice grips, then heat that shaft up. You've got access to it on down here if you've got the spindle all the way down, and you can heat that shaft up, and the heat will transfer up to here where the screw is, and that will help you to loosen that screw. So if you have a heat gun, that might help you to get that screw off. On this one, I wasn't able to get the original shaft out, so I found a carrier cover with shaft attached of another one, but the shaft dimensions weren't the same. So I had to find another carrier cover with shaft that would fit the arms. So just be aware of that the shaft diameters, depending on the vintage of your slit lamp, might be different, and the arm might not fit on, or it might be too loose going onto the shaft. So that was important. That's important. And I would have used this shaft, but couldn't get it out. Tried heating it up, holding it and hitting it with a hammer, but still couldn't get it. So a suggestion was made to get a Dremel tool and cut this casing, not all the way to the threads, and then get a screwdriver and bust this casing out to get this shaft back out. But I was able to find another one. Got this off of a different model. It was still a Topcon, but different model, and it fit the arm, the microscope arm, so we used that. And putting it all back together, there was a lot of resistance. It could be that the clearance of the spindle shaft coming through here was not correct, or something could have been a little bent from the damage, the reason it even broke. But after cleaning the spindle and greasing and oiling it and making sure the joystick mechanism was moving freely, it was still had trouble going up and down. So what I did was took the plate off up here that holds this spindle shaft in here, took it off and replaced the screws. The screws in here are longer, and without the plate they would hit the shaft. So I put just some smaller screws in there to cover up the holes, and just left it completely off. The the plate and the washers, and since this was flush, I didn't even put a washer here that was on there originally, and now it's moving freely, and it's moving correctly. So you might find that you might have to do that if you're changing all these things, or in any case, if you're getting a lot of resistance, try just taking that plate off or moving it if you have a little room, and put your screw back on and try that and see if that makes a difference to the elevation clearance. So here's that little plate here, and the screws and the washers. And the shaft, they're not all the same diameter. So that could be an issue if you're trying to replace it.